Welcome back, everybody, to what I hope moving forward will be a weekly series that I'm calling Forgotten History. A while back, some of you may remember, I did a video on Abraham Lincoln's career as a wrestler. And I thought I would continue sharing stories like that. Stories that maybe aren't the ones that everybody talks about, the things that everybody knows about, but maybe are lesser known things about famous people or information about people that have largely been consigned to being a footnote in history. Now, I don't believe John Buford is a footnote in history, but I also don't believe he gets the publicity or the notoriety that he deserves for his role in the Union Army during the American Civil War. So join me as we take a look at the life and career of Major General John Buford. So John Buford Jr. was born March 4th, 1826, just outside of Lexington, Kentucky, in Woodford County. A few years after he was born, the family moved to Rock Island, Illinois, which is where Buford would grow up along the banks of the Mississippi River. His father, John Sr., was actually a political opponent of Abraham Lincoln, who served in various government offices throughout his life. Buford's older half-brother, Napoleon Bonaparte Buford, was a Union general that served under Ulysses S. Grant at the battles of Belmont and in the Siege of Corinth, and later commanded the District of East Arkansas. They had a cousin, Abraham Buford, who was a Confederate brigadier general in charge of cavalry in the Western Theater. As a young man growing up in Rock Island, John was known from an early age to be a fine horseman. Neighbors would recall seeing him often, quote, on a bareback horse that no other boy in the town could ride. So it always seemed that John Buford was destined to be a cavalryman. As a teenager, he went to Knox College for a single year before being accepted into the class of 1848 at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Buford performed pretty well at West Point. He finished just in the kind of upper middle of his class, 16th. Out of the 25 men in the class of 1848 who went on to serve during the American Civil War, Buford was the only one to reach the rank of Major General. After he graduated, Buford was commissioned a brevet second lieutenant in the 1st U.S. Dragoons. And the following year, he transferred to the 2nd Dragoons, where he would serve throughout the rest of his career prior to the Civil War. During his service, Buford married Martha McDowell Duke, who was known to her friends and family as Patty. Patty's great-uncle was Chief Justice John Marshall, and a number of her cousins would later on go on to serve as officers in the Confederate Army. With his time in the 2nd Dragoons, Buford fought against the Sioux in Texas. He did peacekeeping duty during the Bleeding Kansas crisis and served in the war in Utah in 1858, which is where he would serve up until the eve of the American Civil War. It was actually the Pony Express that brought letters containing word of the attack on Fort Sumter and led to Buford having a decision to make. He was a native Kentuckian. He was the son of a slave-owning father and the husband of a woman whose relatives chose to fight for the South. And a number of his own family members also chose to go south with the Confederacy. But on the other hand, Buford had been educated in the North, and he had come to maturity in the Army. His two most influential professionals as role models were Colonels William Harney and Philip St. George Cooke, who were both Southerners who decided to remain with the Union in the U.S. Army. Buford loved his profession, and his time on the frontier had severed any ties he may have had that drew many of the other Southerners home to fight for their native South. John Gibbon, who himself was a native North Carolinian, faced the same dilemma, and he recalled in a post-war memoir the evening that John Buford made his decision to fight for the Union. This is what Gibbon said. One night after the arrival of the mail, we were in Buford's room, when he said in his slow and deliberate way, "I got a letter from the governor of Kentucky. He sent me word to come to Kentucky at once, and I shall have anything I want." With a good deal of anxiety, Gibbon said, "I asked him, 'What did you answer, John?' And my relief was great when he replied, 'I sent him word that I am a captain in the United States Army, and I intend to remain one.'" When the Civil War began, Buford was still a captain in the 2nd Dragoons. In November of 1861, he was promoted to the rank of major and made an assistant inspector general of the defenses surrounding Washington, D.C. In that capacity, he would remain until John Pope took command of the Army of Virginia in July of 1862 and secured a commission for Buford as a brigadier general commanding a cavalry brigade in the 2nd Corps. This was still a time in the Union Army when cavalry was assigned to each of the corps and did not have an independent command. Buford's first action then as a brigade commander came in August 1862 at the Second Battle of Bull Run. He actually led his brigade very well before being shot in the knee by a gunshot wound. During the Maryland campaign, General McClellan pulled Buford from brigade command and appointed him to the general staff as his chief of cavalry. Just a week later, at the Battle of Antietam, he found himself stuck at headquarters with no field command. Now, that said, the lack of field command did not keep Buford from influencing events that day. He happened to be present when Joe Hooker was wounded at the cornfield, and when Hooker expressed his desire that General Meade, who was one of his division commanders, assume command of the 1st Corps, Buford spurred his horse and found General McClellan and relayed Hooker's wishes to the commanding general. Author David Petrucci wrote, Buford then played a major role in getting the right commander to the right place at the crucial time. It would not be the last time this would happen. So after the Battle of Antietam, Buford remained on the general's staff under Ambrose Burnside through the Battle of Fredericksburg. When Joe Hooker took command of the Army of the Potomac after that, he reorganized the cavalry into a single, separate corps, and Buford was given command of the Reserve Brigade of Regular Infantry, reporting directly to the corps commander, a friend of his by the name of George Stoneman. After the Battle of Chancellorsville, Alfred Pleasanton was given command of the Cavalry Corps, though General Hooker would later lament that Buford would have been the better choice. Buford was given a division command and led his division into action at Brandy Station, the largest cavalry battle of the American Civil War. He led them again a few weeks later in June 1863 at the Battle of Upperville, Virginia, where he unsuccessfully attempted to turn Jeb Stuart's flank. A week later, Buford's division rode into the small southern Pennsylvania town of Gettysburg and into history for John Buford. Quickly realizing the tactical importance of the place, but also that he was facing a superior force of Confederate infantry, Buford set about creating a defense against the Confederate advance. He was acutely aware of the tactical importance of holding the high ground south of town. And when Heath's division attacked on the morning of July 1st, Buford's 2 brigades fought hard to hold the ground west of Gettysburg, to allow time and room for infantry support to arrive so that they could eventually hold the ground south of town at Cemetery Hill and Cemetery Ridge. Buford's skillful defensive troop dispositions, coupled with the bravery and tenacity of his dismounted men, allowed the 1st Infantry Corps time to come up in support and maintain a Union foothold on these tactically important positions. Buford's foresight in choosing the ground at Gettysburg, his skill and tenacity in holding his position despite overwhelming numbers of rebel infantry attacking him, played a crucial role in the Union victory at the Battle of Gettysburg. Daniel Devlin, in his book Buford at Gettysburg, wrote this. He said, "The brilliant achievement of Buford, with his small body of cavalry, up to that time hardly appreciated as to the right use to be made of them, is but too little considered in the history of the Battle of Gettysburg. It was his foresight and energy, his pluck and self-reliance in thrusting forward his forces and pushing the enemy, and thus inviting, almost compelling their return, that brought on the engagement of the 1st of July. Major General John Watts de Peyster wrote this. He said, "The hero was John Buford. He not only showed the rarest tenacity, but his personal capacity made his cavalry accomplish marvels and rival infantry in their steadfastness. Glorious John Buford." Following the Battle of Gettysburg, the Army of the Potomac saw little major action for the rest of 1863. During Lee's retreat south of Gettysburg, Buford pursued the Confederates to Warrenton, Virginia, and was afterward engaged in a number of small operations in central Virginia, giving especially valuable service in covering George Meade's infantry movements in the October 1863 Bristow campaign. Unfortunately, by mid-December, it was becoming obvious that Buford was getting sick, possibly from contracting typhoid, and he took respite at the Washington home of his old friend, George Stoneman. On December 16th, Stoneman initiated a proposal that Buford be promoted to the rank of Major General, and President Abraham Lincoln agreed, writing, "I'm informed that General Buford will not survive the day. It suggests itself to me that he will be made a Major General for distinguished and meritorious service at the Battle of Gettysburg." Informed of the promotion, Buford had some doubt as to whether it was real, and he asked, "Does he mean it?" When he was assured the promotion was genuine, he replied, "It's too late. Now I wish I could live." In his last hours, Buford was attended by his aide, Captain Miles Keogh, who would later go on to perish at the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, and by Edward, his black servant. Also present were Lieutenant Colonel A.J. Alexander and General Stoneman. His wife Patty was on her way from Rock Island, Illinois, but unfortunately she would not arrive in time. Near the end, he became delirious and began to admonish his servant. But then, in a moment of clarity, he called for the man and apologized. He said, "Edward, I hear that I've been scolding you. I did not know what I was doing. Edward, you've been a faithful servant to me." John Buford died at 2 p.m. on December 16, 1863, while Miles Keogh held him in his arms. His final reported words were, "Put guards on all the roads, and don't let the men run to the rear." On December 20th, memorial services were held at the New York Avenue Presbyterian Church, a church on the corner of 8th Street and New York Avenue in Washington, D.C. President Lincoln was among the mourners. Buford's wife was unable to attend due to illness. The pallbearers included General Casey, Heintzelman, Sickles, Schofield, Hancock, Doubleday, and Gouverneur Warren. General Stoneman commanded the escort in a procession that included Gray Eagle, Buford's old white horse that he rode at Gettysburg. No more to follow his daring form or see him dash through the battle's storm. No more with him to ride down the foe and behold his falchion's crushing blow, nor hear his voice like a rushing blast as a rider and steed went charging past. Buford is dead. Those words were written in the Philadelphia Inquirer on December 21st. After the service, two of Buford's staff, Captains Keogh and Wadsworth, escorted his body to West Point, where he was buried alongside fellow hero of Gettysburg, Lieutenant Alonzo Cushing, who had died defending that high ground that Buford recognized as being so valuable. In 1865, a 25-foot obelisk-style monument was erected over his grave, financed by the members of his old division. The officers of his staff published a resolution that set forth the esteem in which John Buford was held by those in his command, and this is what they said. "We, the staff officers of the late Major General John Buford, fully appreciating his merits as a gentleman, soldier, commander, and a patriot, conceive his death to be an irreparable loss to the cavalry arm of the service. That we have been deprived of a friend and leader whose sole ambition was our success, and whose chief pleasure was in administering to the welfare, safety, and happiness of the soldiers and men of his command. That to his unwearied exertions and the many responsible positions which he has occupied, the service at large is indebted for much of its efficiency, and in his death the cavalry has lost a firm friend and most ardent advocate, that we are called to mourn the loss of one who was ever to us as the kindest and tenderest father, and that our fondest desire and wish will ever be to perpetuate his memory and emulate his greatness."